Welcome to Ingrid Bergman, a podcast about my mother, Ingrid Bergman.
You know my mother, Ingrid Bergman. She was at Cannes, and she won an award. And so did I.
In all seriousness, welcome to Riviera Rats, a Palme d'Or podcast. I am Greg.
I am Bill.
And today we are talking about Rossellini's and Bergmans.
We sure are. I realized that like 12 movies into the selection today that we have Isabella's parents on display in this collection of films.
It is very exciting, and it feels salient given what else is happening at the moment we are recording. This will be our largest competition we ever cover, Bill, and with the largest number of top prizes.
I am glad about that. You know, it says a lot about the strength of our friendship, Greg, that you and I both, when watching movies for this show, find ourselves saying, why am I doing this? Why am I friends with this person? Why can't I just put a stop to this? And then we just keep trucking on because, you know, you're a part of me and I'm a part of you. This is the most that doing stuff for the show has ever felt like homework.
Agreed.
And I think it's the most it ever will. And that's partly because even when the films were good, this is the very first Cannes Film Festival, which means these movies are not selected in the way that they're selected much later on.
Absolutely.
We're not watching Cannes movies, basically. We're watching the first year of a marketplace, basically,
yes,
with a lot of like library titles that Hollywood scooped out of its vault and decided to throw to the French to be nice. And the Russians did too.
Yes, and we're watching basically Model UN, where they're making sure that every country is represented on the jury and in the winners.
Yes, including the fact that we don't really have a Palme d'Or winner because they gave what was then the grand prize to every country and not to one film. And they chose the best selections. As Michael Gebert said, a fit of diplomatic dullness. They chose the best selections from each country.
Yeah, which is even more dull than the Academy Awards does with its international feature choices.
Yeah.
To list, and we will cover these movies in detail later on, but our 11 winners for this year were Brief Encounter, Torment, The Last Chance, The Lost Weekend, Maria Candelaria, Men Without Wings, Nietzsche Nagar, Red Meadows, Rome Open City, Pastoral Symphony, and The Turning Point. But before we get into it, Bill, at the moment we're recording this, we are amidst the feverish highs and embarrassing lows of Oscar season.
I am fascinated to see where things go. So we're recording this a month before the Oscars. This will be coming out after the Oscars. So I look forward to actually listening to the show when it comes out to find out how things have ended up. Did Carla Gascon go to the show? Did she win? I mean, I never thought she was going to win even when things were looking rosy. That whole situation is, to quote The Far Side, strangely grisly but hilarious, whatever the quote was.
It's that familiar theater of actors being their own undoing because they just can't stop listening to themselves trying to get it right. Like, let me hang on. Let me do one more take and I'll be forgiven.
Yeah. Well, what the whole thing really shows to me is the fact that, and I've probably already said this on our BGM Oscar episode by now, if it comes up, which I'm sure it will. It's just made Netflix look like a real cheap outfit because they want to play with major studios, but they don't know how to behave like a studio. They inspired two major strikes because they don't know how to behave like a movie studio. If Emilia Perez was produced by 20th Century Fox or Disney or whoever, a publicist would have shut her Twitter down from the second that movie came out. They have been looking towards winning an Oscar for this movie since the Cannes Film Festival. Why was this never taken care of? The fact that there wasn't somebody whose job it was to clear all that up, given that we know that this is a part of Oscar campaigning. I don't like the fact that Oscar campaigning involves basically the same strategies as a political campaign. I don't need Carla Gascon to be a good person. I thought she was really good in that movie. I wouldn't have picked her over some other people they could have nominated, but she is really good in that movie, and I don't think she's nominated just because Academy voters are worried about being woke. And so, like, it doesn't really make a difference to me in terms of choosing the winner. But we know that this is a reality of how the Oscars are played now. So why didn't someone do a better job of that? And then once the story came out, why didn't a publicist do a better job of shutting her down and keeping her from opening her mouth and like making things worse every time she opens her mouth?
I mean, she also gives the vibe of not someone who doesn't listen to a publicist.
Yes, but documents have been signed in this regard.
Yeah, there might have been NDAs and things like that.
But also just not just NDAs, but like agreements to certain things. Like, we're going to give you a bonus if you do this. You're going to, and then like publicists get bonuses if you get an Oscar nom, and then if you win, they get even more. There
are probably clauses that say don't go till I say go.
Yeah, but also, I don't know. I mean, this is somebody who became famous out of nowhere, even though she was famous in the Latin world for quite a while. But she's behaving like somebody who doesn't know how to be famous. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
So now we have an Amelia Perez campaign without Amelia Perez being involved. Like, she was about to get on a plane to come to LA for the last month of campaigning, and they were like, stay home.
And there's a chance now that this movie could walk away with like 1 Oscar versus it originally predicted like 4, maybe 5.
I don't know that I predicted it winning that many anyway. The thing people need to realize is that the reason why it's nominated for so many categories is because it qualifies in so many categories. Yeah. Not because they like it that much more than they like The Brutalist or I'm Still Here.
Yes, and on that note, these are the lists of movies from the 2024 Cannes competition that made the roster of this year's Academy Award nominees. Amelia Perez led with 13 nominations, and as Bill said, 2 of those were in the same category, and one of them was in a category virtually no other movies get nominated in, which is International Feature Film.
Yeah.
The Substance was nominated for 5. Honora, our Palme d'Or winner, was nominated for 6. The Girl with the Needle and The Seed of the Sacred Fig were both nominated in International Feature Film. The Apprentice is nominated for 2 acting awards.
Mm-hmm.
And then from Un Certain Regard, Flo is nominated for International Feature Film and Best Animated Feature. And then from the silent competition, not silent competition, Greg, the shorts competition.
Wow.
We've got The Man Who Could Not Remain Silent. That's why I said that word.
Oh.
But more important than all of these things is we have a new Spice Girl, Isabella Rossellini.
You know, my mother, Ingrid Bergman, was never a Spice Girl. So I'm proud to be the first in my family. And I hope she wins. I know Zoe Saldana has the lock on it, and Zoe Saldana's great in that movie. For all that I didn't like about that film, she's great. But I hope Isabella Rossellini wins.
I'm with you completely. I'm not trying to just be contrarian because I know all she does is side-eye and print documents. But it is, there were 3 or 4 fantastic performances not nominated that I would have picked over Isabella. Since they're not there, Isabella is my choice.
Oh, no, I wouldn't have picked anyone over her. I really wanted her in there.
Oh, I mean, I wanted her nominated, but she wouldn't have been my win if Michelle Austin or Ange.
Oh, true. Yeah. Without a doubt. Yeah.
Last thing before we get to our dates to the festival, I'm not trying to make us record for 3 hours, but we would be neglectful to not mention this. We have lost another master. And he matters because we're talking about Rita Hayworth this episode, and that is David Lynch.
Yes, that's right.
Speaking of Isabella.
Yeah, speaking of Isabella, we did lose. I forgot. You know, I feel like we haven't recorded in about 18 months, so I forget what's happened since the last time we did this. It hasn't been that long, but, you know, Christmas break makes a different feeling for time.
Oh, tons has happened. I mean, Gaza is going to be owned by the U.S. That much has happened.
Right. Yeah, well, that should go well. Yeah, that was crazy. It was crazy to me how shocked I was when David Lynch died.
Yeah.
Former winner of the Best Director at Cannes.
And the Palme d'Or.
And the Palme d'Or, of course, yes.
It's easy to forget about Wild at Heart, Bill.
I do forget about that movie. You know, he was in his late 70s. That's not really all that old anymore. It's not young either. Like, it's not a shocking age to die. But I always do believe that people have age personalities, and his was of a young man. He was always a young man, even in his 70s, the way he spoke and the way he talked about life and the videos he posted, all that stuff. He was like a cool young guy. So to me, it was really quite shocking that he was cut down in his prime, even though I also did know that he was suffering quite a bit from his emphysema and that it limited his output. And I knew that we probably weren't going to get another movie from him, but I kind of hoped against hope that we would. So, you know, it shouldn't have been as shocking as it was.
Yeah, he's a director who was always fresh and always pushing the envelope. So we never gave him labels like seasoned.
Yeah, or legendary or whatever. Yeah, he was always hip and young people still loved him. And I'll always be grateful for Mulholland Drive. It's one of my faves.
Serious masterpiece, and I'm excited when we cover that year.
I am too, because I haven't opened my Blu-ray of it, and it's been sitting on my shelf for like 3 years. So it's one of my favorites, and yet I never watch it, apparently.
Is it the Criterion?
Yeah.
Does it have a director's commentary?
I don't remember what's on it.
Okay.
I wonder if it also has chapter stops, because remember when he first put it out on DVD, it didn't have chapter stops.
This is going to be really like YouTube nerd culture, but can I be there when you pull it out of its cellophane and like open up the booklet and stuff?
I think that's the closest you've come to crossing the line with me, Greg. I think we should stay just friends. I think that's best.
Okay, tell us about the festival.
We have 3 years of podcasting ahead of us. I don't want to ruin, Yeah.
Why don't you tell us about the festival, Bill?
All right. So, Greg, we are going back to the very first Cannes Film Festival, mostly because we just want to get it out of the way, and I'm so happy we're finally there.
Totally.
This festival occurred from September 20th to October 5th of 1946. If you haven't listened to our intro episode, you should, because there's a lot of info that I don't really want to double back on from that episode about the creation, the origins of the Cannes Film Festival. On that episode, we talked a little about the history that we learned, from reading books and articles and whatever. The summation basically being that the Venice Film Festival had become too controlled by the fascists, and it inspired film people to create a festival free of Mussolini. There was the big movie theater in Cannes that helped make the decision for where to do it, as well as the fact that they were lobbied by who? The hoteliers, basically, of Cannes, because they wanted to extend their summer season with more business. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, as we mentioned before, the initial festival was supposed to start on September 1st, 1939, which was also the day Hitler invaded Poland, because there's nothing he loved more than to ruin anyone's good time.
It's true.
And so it doesn't get around until 1946. The first film festival was a lot of fun and a bit of a disaster. There are a lot of films being screened without subtitles. Someone didn't think of that. And of course, there are films coming from all over the world. The local public of Cannes were also invited to see films for free. They decided that that would be a good idea. The local Cannois showed up, smoked through screenings despite being asked not to, hogged all the best seats, and scammed all their friends in on their, they were all given single invitations to attend films, and they scammed all their friends in. There was jewels and money stolen from hotel rooms. 30 cars were stolen during the film festivals. The fact that the screenings were free made a lot of the merchants in Cannes go on strike. They were really pissed off about it. Not shocking to say that ticket reservations for the locals were canceled as of the second Cannes Film Festival, which was 2 years later, because it did not go well.
Don't let the regional trash into the theater.
Yeah. The opening ceremony included fireworks on the port and the La Marseillaise, sung by Grace Moore. I don't know if you know Grace Moore. She was nominated for Best Actress in 1934 for the movie One Night of Love. She was very beautiful, very good operatic singer. But that would have been a lot to take. And other pratfalls, the screening of Notorious is kind of ruined by the fact that reels were accidentally shown out of order, so people thought the movie made no sense. And the screening of a short film, well, it's listed as a short film in the festival, even though according to IMDb it's 70 minutes long, which for a Russian film is a short film. There's a film called The Fall of Berlin, 1945 by Yuli Reisman and Yelizaveta Svilova, which was the opening night film. It had a great deal of issues with its projection, to the point that the Russian delegation decided that they were being sabotaged deliberately and left and stayed away from the 1947 festival altogether. So there's a lot going on. And then, of course, as we mentioned, at the end of the festival, the jury decided to give the Palme d'Or not to one film, but to a whole bunch. And this is something, as I said, Michael Gebert called this a fit of diplomatic dullness. He also pointed out that by not just choosing Open City for the Palme d'Or, they kind of ruined what could have been a great PR for them in future years, of the first Palme d'Or winner being this film that we'll talk about, but that is really famous and made its mark immediately upon its being released.
In other competitions, because this is so early in the history of cinema, we don't have a lot of other festivals making up the festival circuit. We don't have Berlin yet. It doesn't come till 1951. And while Venice had started in 1939, it didn't come back until 1947. Or I should say it stopped in 1939 and didn't come back till 1947.
That's right.
Winning the Oscar for Best Picture was The Best Years of Our Lives by William Wyler, director of the 1957 Palme d'Or winner, Friendly Persuasion. And this is before any foreign language film awards are being given out at all, not even honorarily.
That's right, because the first one is the next year, I believe. Yeah, which is Shoeshine?
I think it goes Shoeshine, and then Bicycle Thieves, and then Rashomon, in some order like that.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. Bill, why don't you tell us about this Arms Around the World jury?
Well, inspired by my adorable co-host, I decided to do a little research on all of these people because, as usual, with the early Cannes Film Festivals, we have no idea who most of these people are. Mm-hmm. We've talked about George Huisman before. He's the president of the jury this year. He would be the president from 1946 until 1949, which is only 3 festivals, but yeah. He was a French historian and politician. He was actually the founder of the Cannes Film Festival, which is also why he was the president for the first 3 festivals. He was actually relieved of his position in the French government of Director General of Fine Arts, among other positions that he held during the Vichy years because he was Jewish. And he was also the mayor of Valmondois. We have on this jury Iris Berry. She was an American who helped establish the original London Film Society and was the first curator of the film department of the Museum of Modern Art in New York City in 1935.
That's distinguished.
Which is considered the first film library. So yes, she is quite distinguished. We have someone named Beaulieu, is all that's listed in Cannes records from Canada. My research suggested it's possibly someone named Marcel Beaulieu, who's a screenwriter, but I couldn't find anything else out about him. From Czechoslovakia, we have Antonín Bruzil, who was a theater reviewer, film reviewer, professor, publicist, and university educator. We have J.H.J. de Jong from Holland, from the Netherlands, a scientific sociological writer. From Romania, we have Dawn Tudor. From the UK, we have Samuel Findlater. I could not find out anything about either of these 2 individuals. From the USSR, we have Sergei Yerasimov, a filmmaker of Quiet Flows to the Dawn and The Wind Rose. Jan Korngold from Poland, I believe was a writer, but again, I couldn't find out much more than that or find out if that was who the right Jan Korngold that I was looking up. From Portugal, we have Domingos Mascarenhas, a footballer from Angola, actually. So he was probably sexy. From Switzerland, we have Hugo Mauerhofer, who was a psychologist and writer, including, he was kind of like a Slavoj Žižek, like a writer about film and psychology.
Oh, does he also spit when he talks?
Oh, it's a lot to deal with. I made it through one film and then I was like, I can only read this person. I can't. Wet talkers are really upsetting for me, and he's king of that mountain. List. Yeah. From Italy, Filippo Menini. From Norway, Moltke Hansen. No information on either of these 2. From Belgium, a very interesting individual, Fernand Rigaud. He was a poet, novelist, explorer, filmmaker, military intelligence during the war. Wow. He explored Iceland in 1931 and wrote a book about it. He was the head of the film service of the Ministry of Public Education from 1946 to 1958. In Belgium, I assume, or in France. He was fired in 1947 due to a mistake by his employee, which led to him being held responsible, partly criminally responsible, for the fire of a film library because of nitrate reels, even though he had actually pointed out the danger of nitrate to his superiors. And this is a fire in which 18 people died.
Jeez.
Yeah, nitrate is scary. Nitrate can catch fire underwater.
Well, it can set fire to our main character in Cinema Paradiso.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, and he goes blind, right?
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Sorry, folks, when we get to that year. This guy sounds very distinguished, Bill. He sounds like he's really accomplished, but I wonder, does he have a podcast?
Oh, he's been waiting all day to deliver that one. Okay, Kjell Stromberg from Sweden, also someone I could not find out information about. Rodolfo Usili from Mexico was a playwright, essayist, and diplomat. His most famous play is El Gesticulador. His novel, Rehearsal for a Crime, was adapted into a film by Buñuel called The Criminal Life of Archibaldo de la Cruz. From Egypt, we had Youssef Wabi, who was one of the most prominent Egyptian stage actors of all time. He was also a director and film actor. His last film was Alexandria Y, by a director we will probably get to know because he represented Egypt at Cannes many times, which was Youssef Chahine. I've only seen one of his films. It was at TIFF, and they didn't tell us that they were screening it with French subtitles instead of English. And I had nowhere to be for 2 hours, so I just did my best.
Is he the guy who did The Cow?
I don't know. I'm not sure. Okay. They have the whole slew of his films on the Criterion channel, and I haven't gotten around to any of them. And last, we have Helge Vomberg from Denmark, a press and cultural attaché at the Danish legation in France from 1920 to 1958. Also the screenwriter of 2 films in the silent years in Denmark.
So not too many people directly involved in the film industry, but a lot of diplomats, scholars, cultural figures.
Yep. Familiar territory for early Cannes, as we know.
For sure.
Greg, tell us about Le Compétition Officielle.
Everybody buckle up. We're going to be here for a few hours.
Yep.
First, let's begin with our minor prizes. Winning the International Jury Prize, this would be akin to the jury prize that we would know of today, was The Battle of the Rails by René Clément. I don't have the French title in front of me. Could you?
I think it's Le Bataille du Rail, I think is the...
Le Bataille du Rail?
Something like that.
This is a very popular movie when it came out in France. It's Clément's first feature-length film. He had this year, or in the 12 months prior, he had been assistant director on a Jean Cocteau movie we're going to be discussing, and he'd made some shorts. But this movie's pretty cool. It is doing what neorealism is doing in different ways. It has real rail workers and non-actors basically playing their own professions. And it was intended as like a counter-narrative to the story that France basically just capitulated with Germany when they invaded.
It's a celebration of la résistance.
Yeah.
It's extremely well made. It's very intelligent. It's well acted, well directed. It kind of also feels like one explosion after another.
Even in its iterative format, like it's very cyclical and like elliptical. I find it very involving, even as sometimes I can't tell the characters all apart.
Yeah,
it adds a sort of like, you know how in Gus Van Sant movies or other movies that use non-actors, the nondescriptness actually adds texture.
Yep.
I think it works to the movie's benefit. We appreciate all of these sort of stock characters as a resistant collective rather than as individual heroes. Also, it is one of the movies in this list that made me go, how the fuck did they do that?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
When they're exploding those trains, those can't be model trains because there's real weeds on both sides of the rails.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Winning Best Actor and Best Actress are stars of 2 of our Grand Prix winners. Ray Milland for The Lost Weekend by Billy Wilder. And
which he wins having already won an Oscar for Best Actor for the same performance.
Yeah, like 8 months earlier.
Yeah.
And Michelle Morgan for Pastoral Symphony by Jean Delanoë.
Yeah.
Basically playing Nell. We'll talk more about the movies themselves, but let's first talk about these performances, starting with Ray Milland. And do you say Ray Milland?
Milland. Yeah.
Milland.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound right any way you say it.
Okay. That's how you say it.
Milland. Yeah. Millon. It's a performance that was probably appreciated for seeming realist at its time.
Yeah.
Now it
it's grungy as well, which is not something. I mean, Hollywood. We'll talk about it later when we talk about the film, but it is a movie that is willing to go much further afield than any other film would do, especially like not until the 70s in terms of like treating alcoholism like a real problem and not like a joke or not as like a romantic tragedy.
Yeah, like it's this Days of Wine and Roses, Man with a Golden Arm. There's not a lot.
Yeah.
But it is, you do have to put on a different hat when you watch something like this. Otherwise it can look like exploitation a bit.
And it's also, he was never an actor that I found particularly interesting. So, he gets this one moment to really rock out and he does okay with it.
Yeah.
As again, to quote our friend Michael Gebert, who was probably pissed off that we quote him all the time, because he's a really lovely curmudgeonly guy. But he mentions that, like, to watch this performance now, it's like he's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the way he clutches his throat every time he takes a drink of booze. But yeah, it would have been seen as a real accomplishment at the time.
I do find it comical that to look haggard and crash diet, he only ate dry toast, coffee, grapefruit juice, and boiled eggs. Which to me just sounds like any Hollywood actress's diet.
Yeah.
He also tried getting drunk once because he wasn't really a drinker, and he ended up on his knees in a bathroom.
Yep,
Yeah. Michelle Morgan.
Michelle Morgan. One of the most beautiful women who ever appeared on screen, particularly because of those shocking eyes that were
so good.
Blue and translucent, even in black and white.
She's winning an award for playing a person with disability in a noble way.
Oh yeah, you have to watch her in other things to really appreciate her star quality. Like when you see her in, I think it's Remorqué, the one with Jean Gabin. Mm-hmm. Like she goes on to play a lot of like slinky femme fatales and, you know, like much more interesting roles than this simpering, you know, tragedy that she does in this fascinating film, I have to tell you.
Oh, very fascinating. And I do find it precious that she thinks blind people walk like Frankenstein's monster.
I know, totally. Totally. Yeah. She also, and like actually not to be too critical of her, I think she wins this award also because she does have a lot of presence and a lot of charisma.
She does.
But we've seen other people play blind in better movies and better performances since, and like she's not even that good at making her eyes look lifeless. Sorry for the insensitive word. The way Audrey Hepburn does in Wait Until Dark, where you truly believe that she's not looking at anything. Michelle Morgan often looks like she's looking at things in this movie.
Yes. She looks like she's processing information from the room.
That's right. Yeah. And like Audrey Hepburn actually made them cut the first 2-3 weeks of filming when she did Wait Until Dark because she felt she hadn't mastered it quite yet. So
I need to watch that movie.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah.
I've seen it many times.
And winning Best Director was, again, René Clément for The Battle of the Rails.
Yeah.
And this is a director we see a lot of in the first 15 years of the festival. In this competition, he had another movie that we could not source, but he also comes back in 1947 with Les Maudits, in 49 with The Walls of Malapaga, which we talked about in our Third Man episode, in 54 with Monsieur Ripois, and then in 1961 with C'è Gioia Vivere. How was that?
So, when you spent time with Italian men inside you on your trip last year, none of them said anything to give you an indication of how their words are pronounced? Or
Okay, say it
Che
to
gioia
me.
vivere.
Okay.
I think that means what a joy life is. Something. What a joy to live.
It doesn't mean just be quiet and keep your head down.
It's interesting to me. Well, yeah. It's interesting to me that he is a big winner for the two films that he's not best known for anymore. Like people don't, when they talk about René Clément, they don't talk about this movie or Les Walls of Malapaga. They talk about Forbidden Games, and Purple Noon. So it's interesting to me that his most celebrated films are forgotten. I think it's because in many ways they haven't aged that well. Walls of Malapaga in particular has not aged well.
No.
Battle of the Rails, from what I understand, is also considered a very controversial film. I think a lot of people took issue with its presentation of history at the time, probably because there has always been a lot of ambivalence in France about how they feel about collaboration versus resistance during the war.
That's interesting. That'd be a really cool monogram, like to read a whole book about that movie.
Without a doubt.
Here is a list of movies we could not source. I'm going to just blow through this.
Great.
We've got The Adventurous Bachelor by Otakar Vávra, and it is...
No, you know I love to tell a boring story. I ordered it from Amazon.com 3 months ago. It took a long time to come. I was really proud of myself because every once in a while I like to treat myself to a DVD import because I like to spend money on this show. I like to prove that I'm a real guy.
You're a team player.
And the Amazon listing said it had English subtitles. The DVD arrived. It did not have English subtitles. I could even tell in Czech that it said Czech only. And I demanded a refund and they gave me one. And I also sent them a lot of screen grabs like the true Karen that I am.
And it's too bad because it's a comedy, which leads me to assume it must be about a cat with 3D glasses.
Well, it also looked good, and the DVD was like a lovely print as well. So yeah, that pissed me off.
Also not to be found is The Bandit, or Il Bandito, by Alberto Lattuada.
Which I wanted to see because I like him.
He will be back in 47 with Il Delitto di Giovanni Episcopo.
Yeah, means the crime.
And Gwendolina in 1957. We've got Blood and Fire, Blood och eld by Anders Henrikson, which was from 1945. Not all of these movies come out in 46. Some of them are from a couple years earlier. We've got Camões by José Leitão de Barros,
which Portuguese speakers can watch on YouTube. It doesn't have English subtitles.
And it's about the epic poet Luís de Camões.
That's right.
We've got Dunia by Mohammed Karim from Egypt, I want to say.
Yeah.
The Queen's Flower by Paul Călinescu. It was in competition, even though it's only 21 minutes long. We've got A Day in Life, or Un giorno nella vita by Alessandro Blasetti. Girl number 217, or Chelovek number 217. I don't know how to say numbers in Russian. By Mikhail Rom. He had been here in 1939, but didn't get to show his movies because that festival never happened, with a movie called Lenin in 1918. We've got The Great Glinka by Lev Arnstam, and he would be back in 1955 with a version of Romeo and Juliet. This is about a famous cultural figure named Mikhail Glinka. I forgot to write down what he did.
All of these Russian movies are on YouTube also for Russian speakers. A lot of them don't have subtitles, which is why we didn't watch them.
And some of them are quite popular. They have extensive trivia on their IMDb pages. Hello Moscow, a musical by Sergei Yudkovich, who would be back in 1954 with Veliki Voin Albani Skanderbeg from 1954, and Otello in 1956, and Lenin v Polsche in 1966. We have His Young Wife by Mario Soldati, La Miseria del Signor Travat from 1945. He would be back in 53 and 59 with La Provinciale and Policarpo Ufficiale di Scrittura.
Yeah, no, we're doing great.
We've got Letter from the Dead, Brevet fra Afdude, from 1946 by Johan Jakobsen, which is described as a serial killer mystery thriller romance.
Pretty much covers it all, doesn't it?
Doesn't it? From Christian Jack, we have A Lover's Return, or Un Revenant, from 1946.
Christian Jacques, I believe. Yeah, which I also wanted to see because I like him too.
He would be back in 52 with Fanfan La Tulipe,
starring the very cute Gérard Philippe.
We've got from Giacomo Gentilomo. Where does it go?
Where does it go, Greg? Where does it go?
The Lovers, Amanti in Fuga, from 1946. Gio's going to listen to this and kill me.
One can only hope.
From René Clément again, we've got Mr. Orchid, La Paix Tranquille.
This one is on Apple. You can rent it on iTunes. For some reason, it does not have subtitles. And I also demanded a refund like a full Karen, and they gave me one.
From Louis Daquin, we have Patrie, and he would be back in 58 with, this is a Romanian title I'm going to screw up. Do you want to give it a go?
I think it's Ciulini
Barangiuli.
Yeah.
We've got Tres Dias Shemdoiush by Barbara Virginia. The Three Musketeers, Los Tres Mosqueteros by Miguel M. Delgado. He won cinematography for both this movie and one of our prize winners. And last in our unwatched list, we have Zoya by Lev Arnstam. Its title is based on a famous poem from 42 by a Margarita Aliguer, and it is also featured, snippets of it are featured in Jean-Luc Godard's Histoire du Cinéma.
Oh, okay. Another one that was on YouTube, but without subtitles. And what's amazing is that we just listed about 400 movies that we were not able to see, and yet we still had the world's highest level of homework that anyone ever had watching movies for a podcast.
Absolutely. Here are some other also rans that we did watch. From John Cromwell in 1946, we've got Anna and the King of Siam. It was nominated for 5 Oscars. It was the winner of 2 for art direction and cinematography.
Yes.
And it got a nomination for Gail Sundergaard, which I can assume was only for the fact that she tanned instead of wearing blackface.
Yes, and she was well known to the voting body. She's actually the very first Best Supporting Actress winner 10 years before this for Anthony Adverse, and often played Asians because she had those the shape of her eyes was such. Because of course, prominent roles that were non-white in old movies were usually played by white actors in makeup,
Right.
and then people who were actually from that culture got to be extras. Which doesn't change for a long time. I mean, I think, as Margaret Cho pointed out on MASH, every once in a while you'd see a real Asian unloading a truck in the background. And, of course, there's a lot of yellowface in this movie. This is the movie that Gertrude Lawrence, famed Broadway legend Gertrude Lawrence, watched and told Rodgers and Hammerstein, you should write this as a musical for me, which they did. Turned it into The King and I, one of the most enduring musicals of all time, a movie that I like a lot more than I like this one. Although, putting aside the problems that we have with cultural presentation, this is a really interesting film. The character detail is a lot more gritty and it's a lot thicker than in The King and I. We have Rex Harrison also in Yellowface playing King Mongkut. And this whole story I find very interesting. I actually rewatched it the other night. I hadn't seen it in at least 20 years. I love Irene Dunn.
She's really good.
She's always really good. She's like almost 50 when she makes this movie. Her sense of preservation is astounding. I really do love her. But the story is interesting to me. Anna Leon Owens was a real woman who served as the tutor to the King of Siam's children in the mid-1800s. They talk about her being Welsh in the movie. In real life, she was British, born in India. She had never been to England by the time she served in the Siamese court. She went after. She actually ended up dying in Montreal. She published her purported memoirs, A Governess in the Court of Siam, something like that it was called. She ran into Prince Chulalongkorn, who was then King Chulalongkorn, many years later after his father had died and he had succeeded to the throne. And he said, why did you write all that bullshit about my dad? My dad wasn't really like that. And she said, no, he was. So there's a lot of questions about the authenticity of her story, which then found new fame when Margaret Landon wrote it as a fictional novel based on those memoirs, which is what this movie is based on, which is what Rodgers and Hammerstein then based on. So there's like a whole broken telephone in terms of cultural authenticity.
Yeah.
And you don't really need to do a lot of research to know that it's kind of bullshit. I mean, the presentation of the king is always, I know that they mean to show him as sort of like remote from the modern world and indulged, but of course he's always presented as being kind of childish, which I understand audiences being sensitive about because Asians are usually portrayed as like, especially Asian men are usually portrayed as being emasculated in some way, feeble. You know, they can't really handle the real world. Yul Brynner brings a lot of like muscle and sexiness to this, but he still plays him like an impish child. He's at least from Asia, even though he's not like that kind of Asian.
Yeah.
But actually everyone else in The King and I is like Latino playing Asians, like Rita Moreno.
I mean, I'll say one thing for Russia, being so bloody big, you can get people who at least are brown. Like,
right. So yeah, you know, and this movie is also, it's stunning. Like the set design is incredible. Truly. The costumes are incredible. It won for cinematography and art direction. It actually won after this festival because this is one of the rare Hollywood movies we have in this festival that's actually contemporary, like of that year. Mm-hmm. A lot of them are from previous years. So it hasn't won its Oscars yet. And also very interesting that it makes things up. Her son did not die as a child in a horseback riding accident. He outlived her. So I don't know why they invent that in this movie.
I sense the movie takes liberties, and it sounds like the 1999 adaptation, Anna and the King, does the same because they're both banned in Thailand.
They are, because the 1999 version tries to sort of like recover these problems with his presentation, but they turn him into an absolute bore. You know, like it's a beautiful but very boring film.
Yeah, and I know I will entertain more often when like a country says we do not condone this representation than when it's like the Amandas of my life telling me that I shouldn't like Gwen Stefani because she dresses up like an Harajuku girl.
Yes. I think also, though, in this case, I think Thailand is a conservative country that just doesn't like other people portraying their revered leaders. I think that's a lot of it.
Oh, okay. So it's just it's defensiveness. Okay.
Yeah, but not the kind of defensiveness you mean, is what I mean. Like, even if they portrayed him exactly honestly in some way, I think they don't like the idea of him being portrayed as a dramatic character.
Right. Don't come for our noble people.
That's right.
It was one of the first high-budget Hollywood movies after the end of the war.
Yeah, and the money is on screen. It truly looks great. They're filming all of it on the 20th Century Fox backlot, and you really do. And I'm sure that a lot of those sets are the same ones from The Keys of the Kingdom a year earlier, which is set in China. But like, what do Americans care? There's like temples in the background. You know what I mean?
And
like
you can tell even in black and white.
Yeah.
From France, by Jean Cocteau, we've got Beauty and the Beast, La Belle et la Bête.
Belle.
I should have said that more like...
Damn.
Exactly. Who's the actor in that movie? The one who's in all of his movies?
Jean Marais.
Jean Marais. I should have said it more like it.
La Belle et la Bête.
Belle.
Where's my cigarette?
Où est Belle? You know, I love this movie. I've seen it a billion times.
So much.
The last time I watched it for this show, just because it was a lovely excuse to rewatch it. And I'm like, I don't know if I need to keep watching this movie, but it's so beautiful. It's a movie that also, it started shooting before the end of the war, because I know they talked about having shots interrupted by planes flying overhead, because they shot a lot of it on the grounds of actual chateaux in the country. Right. But what a beautiful way to pay tribute to the spirit of France at the end of the war, with this gorgeous fairy tale that it has this starry-eyed view of romance and magic, but isn't childish. It's not a childish film. It's actually quite sexy and robust. Mm-hmm. And also very, very inventive. I'm sure a lot of people know that when Francis Ford Coppola made Bram Stoker's Dracula, he insisted on emphasizing in-camera visual effects in that film, and he based all of them on Beauty and the Beast.
And the candlesticks, the arms holding the candles,
amazing.
Where the shot is reversed, so it looks like they're being lit up when they're actually being blown out.
That's right.
That's used again in a scene in HBO's Angels in America.
Well, there's a lot of references to Cocteau in that film. Yeah.
And all of the moving furniture becomes an inspiration for the 1991 Beauty and the Beast by Disney.
Of course. Yeah.
BFI called this one of the top 50 films you should see by the age of 14. And I'm guessing that list should also include Madonna, Truth or Dare? I'm just gay aesthetics all around.
Yeah, absolutely.
I find this movie rich in that it is a fable, but it is coded with so much, and I don't say this a lot because I hate when other people do, but it's coded with so much queerness. Oh,
yeah. Yeah, I mean, Jean Cocteau really, he probably avoided direct questions, but the man did not hide who he was, and you can see it all over his films. And also when he casts his boyfriends, you can tell. You're like, someone behind the camera is fucking that man.
Oh, yeah. No, Jean Marais he's getting paid for a lot. And, and I just love this image of this decadent daddy bear dressed up in lamb.
I know, with those epaulettes. I love the costumes. I also love Jean Marais is great. He's everything that the French love. A perfect body with the face of a woman who died 75 years ago, but is still hanging on. Like it's hysterical. What they call a handsome man in that country.
Well, I mean, that's in your wheelhouse. He's got Clint Eastwood face.
They love ugly, sexy in that country is what they love.
They do.
Yeah.
I also enjoy the send up of the trite ending that Jean Cocteau plays the ending deliberately to be saccharine, so that because he wants the audience to go, no, I don't want her to love him once he turns into a beautiful prince.
Yeah, it is funny that she looks at him and she's kind of like, because that's how we all feel in every single version of Beauty and the Beast, which is that we're like, oh my God, and now I can't wait till he turns into a prince, because, you can't marry an actual animal. And then he always becomes like a simpering boar in all the Disney versions and everything. And you're like, oh, maybe she should fuck the buffalo instead.
Yeah.
Because, yeah.
Fun fact, the stream he's sipping out of, when he's just lapping
so
up. So
gross. That's such a gross noise.
Do you know what it is? That's a sewage.
Yeah.
What is it called? It's sewage runoff.
Yeah. Well, he lived to be an old man, so,
Moving on, we've got by Basil Dearden, The Captive Heart from 1946. A movie that was popular in its time.
Yeah, of course. Another film celebrating the spirit of a people who survived the war.
Yeah, and it's a handsome movie.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be shocked if this movie gets a rescue, like recuperated in the years to come.
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot to complain about in it. It's considered the first World War II POW movie post-war. Stars a very cute Michael Redgrave.
Yep. Played on our team.
Is that right?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, and then there's a feeling of real stakes inside what should be a silly premise.
Yeah, because it's a real. I mean, it's kind of like a Nicholas Sparks novel or something, right? Like he is a Czech soldier who spoke perfect English because he had grown up in London with a diplomat father. He is escaping the Nazis and we find out in a flashback, he had taken the identity of a dead English soldier and then ends up in a German POW camp with other English soldiers. And no one knows that the real man whose identity he took is dead. But then the men find out and they keep a secret. But then the dead man's wife starts writing to him, played by Michael Redgrave's real-life wife, Rachel Kempson. So aside from my mother, Ingrid Bergman, we also have the parents of another famous actress in this festival, which is Vanessa Redgrave. Mm-hmm. And you can tell because she looks a lot like her mom. They have the same like straight back, willowy figure. And Lynn looked a lot like their dad. So she keeps writing to him. He writes back to her. And it's kind of like a Return of Martin Guerre Summersby situation, which is that she wasn't happy with her real husband, but she falls in love with this man, wondering why her husband has become so romantic and beautiful and whatever. And he falls in love with her through the letters. And then, they meet at the end, as well as the things we find out about the other POWs. I really love this movie. I love Basil Dearden. A lot of this movie copies In This Our Life by Noel Coward and David Lean from a few years earlier. It's sort of the same template. And that's probably why it wasn't more successful at the time, is that it kind of felt like another, in the assembly line of morale boosters of the time. But it's a sturdy and satisfying film. And like the ending is ridiculous, like the running into the door and was like a thunderstorm or something out the window. I don't remember. It's something very cranes are flying-esque.
Yeah, it's very kinetic. It's very kinetic, moving throughout, even when it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
From George Cukor, we've got the 1944 movie Gaslight. And by 2025, I can safely say we still don't know what it means to gaslight somebody.
I mean, people just use it now. I had this argument when we were working on Dangerous Liaisons because they often refer to that scene where, the scene, if you remember, where Emily, the courtesan, laughs at her on her way out the door. Yeah. And then he says, no, she was here to get money from me. And they call it the gaslighting scene. And I'm like, he's not gaslighting her in that scene. He's just lying.
Lying is not gaslighting.
Right. Like gaslighting would be if he was like, she didn't laugh. Why do you think she laughed? But what he says is, oh no, she's here because she's here to get money from me for her charity, which is just lying. Like people just call every conflict with a boyfriend gaslighting now.
It's not even triangulation or it goes deeper than that. It makes you second guess yourself. So in the movie, when she has, he convinces her that she stole something, that she stuck something inside her purse.
Well, yeah, he's convincing her that she's mentally feeble is what it is. He's trying to convince her that she's insane so that she'll kill herself so that he can find her jewels.
Exactly.
I had not seen this film in over 20 years. I had not seen it since like when I first started watching old movies. And I ate every bit of it up. I loved it so much. It is so stodgy. Like it's clearly based on a play. The whole thing takes place in the house. Yep. Ingrid Bergman gives one of her most ridiculous performances. Like she has to like cry and wring her handkerchief to win an Oscar.
And yet she pulls it off.
Yeah, she pulls it off, but it's a gorgeous film as well. She won Best Actress. It also won Best Art Direction. And Charles Boyer couldn't be more villainous if he was like clinging, like a finger to the mustache, Pepe Le Pew style, every single scene. It's so funny how ridiculous he is.
He can just enter a room and you go, that's the villain. You might not even know.
Yeah.
You don't even have to know that there is a villain. You just go, oh, we have a villain here.
Yeah. But it is also proof that Hollywood was not taking this film festival seriously, that they're like, yeah, take our old movies from 3 years ago. It's fine.
Totally. We've also got, in her first film role, a seasoned tart named Angela Lansbury.
Who's like 16 when she shoots this movie, and she looks 30.
She looks like Jessica Fletcher.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
But this year in particular feels like a turning point, especially in the female performances. We're seeing a turn towards a more modern acting style. Like, I'm thinking about the Bergman performances, but also Rita Hayworth when we get to her. And then we still got the old. We've got theater-trained Celia Johnson doing what she's doing.
Yeah.
It's an interesting moment of transition.
Without a doubt.
This is also one of 4 movies in this competition that are adapted into Lux Radio.
Which was a very common thing back then. It was just a way to spread out the marketing of a movie, was to do a radio adaptation, because it could inspire people to go to the movies.
I think if the festival was anything like what it is today, we would have seen Ingrid Bergman win Best Actress for her 2 performances instead of Michelle Morgan.
Yeah.
My last words on this is I think Joseph Cotten is very miscast, particularly because he has the sex appeal of a canned fish. And but I love Dame May Whitty as the nosy neighbor.
Oh, so great. She's just always so inconvenient all the time. Yeah.
All the time. We've got also in the competition, we've got Gilda by Charles Vidor. One of the best aged movies in this list.
Without a doubt. I had another one I had not seen in a very long time, so it was kind of like watching it for the first time. I just kept watching her and trying to think, is there a flaw on this woman anywhere? Or what? I know that she was worked on quite a bit. She was a Latina girl who had her hair dyed, and she had her forehead painfully reshaped through electrolysis. Wow. Yeah, they moved her hairline back like 4 inches.
Oh, Kim Kardashian did the same thing.
Yeah, like to give her more like a waspy, mask. Also had a really, really, really tragic life. But my God, she was beautiful. And I couldn't find anything wrong with her. She was perfect. And Big Feet is the closest I could come to finding anything wrong with her.
Or with her performance. The performance is flawless.
It's flawless.
It's the kind of perfection that feels like it can't be learned or trained. It feels like it just comes out of somebody naturally.
Well, this is a woman who'd been performing since she was a kid. She traveled up and down the coast of the Americas with her father dancing. He was from Spain. Her mother was a Ziegfeld girl, like an Irish-American Ziegfeld girl, something like that. And her father was Spanish. And she toured with him a lot. He also sexually abused her since she was a little girl, which is also why she had a lot of problems in her life, lived with a lot of trauma from that before we knew what that was. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't be surprised if it also contributed to the fact that she had Alzheimer's from a very young age, which for many years people thought was because she was an alcoholic. A really, really rough time, but like Gilda catches her at the apex of her beauty and her charisma and her talent.
Yes.
It's also a movie that has aged well because it was really sexy then. It's still sexy now. The sexual games in it feel really mature.
Yeah.
And still feel contemporary. It's also a rare noir that relies on like sensuality.
Yes.
And that aspect of it works, despite the fact that it is a proper noir. And also it all works despite the fact that Glenn Ford is right up there with your other canned fish in terms of sex appeal.
Yeah, absolutely.
Real dad energy from these guys. Not daddy.
Between this, The Big Heat, 3:10 to Yuma, he's not a bad actor. I just like he works on screen, but he's one of Canada's exports that the US can keep.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. He was one of her pallbearers. I found that very touching.
Yeah. Well, they worked together again. More recently, I saw Affair in Trinidad, which was a second-rate Gilda. It's the two of them. I think it's Charles Vidor. I can't remember. It's basically the same story, except instead of where does this one take place? Argentina.
Argentina. Yeah.
Yeah, and this one takes place in, as the title suggests, in Trinidad, and it's the similar setup, the triangle, and another series of gorgeous gowns for her. So they probably got along very well.
I do feel like Hollywood's been trying to pay her back for not acknowledging her talents in her time. Like, I feel like this is the whole reason Kim Basinger wins for LA Confidential.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah. From Bernard Knowles, we have The Magic Bow. You told me, and I took it very seriously. You said this one is really hard to watch. The quality of it.
Yeah, the quality on YouTube is really bad, to the point that I forgot that I even watched it.
And so you said if you would leave this one last, you wouldn't be wrong. And I left it dead last and didn't even watch it.
It's yet another musical biopic, as were very popular in the 40s. Biopics of composers, which were usually just an excuse for the music. And as such, it's fine because this one's it's about Toscanini, is it?
Mm-hmm. No. It's about Niccolo Paganini, Italian violinist.
Paganini, excuse me. It's been a rough couple weeks.
I've been having a rough hour saying Italian words.
I know. No, it's been some of them that I watched during the production of Dangerous Liaisons was me watching them on. Actually, not. It's not that I was too little sleep. It was just a really stressful time, and not even in a bad way. It was just a stressful time. Anyway, Paganini, played by Stuart Granger, who was like a real heartthrob of his day. You know, tall, strapping hunk of a man. Mm-hmm. Most famously. Claimed that he had had an affair with Deborah Carr and told everyone about it. And someone said to Deborah Carr, you know that Stuart Granger is telling everyone that you guys slept together. And she said, what a gallant man he is. Which is such a hot response. I mean,
Third class.
What a dame. Anyway, there's nothing to recommend this movie. It's just, it's a really, in terms of those musical biopics that really hit all the typical points where you can tell it's all bullshit because they're all the same movie. This one's even worse in terms of its quality of directing, writing, acting. It's from the Gainsborough Studios. I have a Criterion Eclipse box set of Gainsborough Studios that has The Man in Grey, The Wicked Lady, and Madonna of the Seven Moons, which is a movie that my Ozu aunt loved a lot. And I wondered when I started this movie why this movie was not included in the Gainsborough box set. And now I know why, because it's bad.
Okay.
But Gainsborough was particularly notable for their handsome period pieces that were also, one of the ways that British people got to enjoy seeing something beautiful after the horrors of the war.
From collaborating companies Disney and RKO, we have Make Mine Music by directors Joshua Midor, Clyde Geronimi, Jack Kinney, Robert Cormack, and Hamilton Lusk. Geronimi would be back in 1953 with Peter Pan, asking us all what makes the red man red. Mm-hmm. And this movie is one of a handful of Disney ventures in this decade that are doing the anthology musical.
Yes, yeah.
It starts
because a lot of their animators were being drafted, and so making a feature film was kind of impractical, mm-hmm. and also seen as a, from what I understand, what I remember reading somewhere or one of the commentaries saying that it was seen as kind of a frivolous indulgence to make a big animated feature film during the war, I guess because of resources. Right. But the more practical reason was just the fact that animators were being called up to the draft. And so it was hard to keep a major project going. So what they did was make all of these anthology films that were a collection usually of animated, like an animation around a song or a skit. A lot of them incorporated live action skits. This one doesn't really, but a lot of them did.
Yeah, Fun and Fancy Free does.
Yes, with Bobby Driscoll and
And I think like some kind of ventriloquist dummy. I feel like it's Candice Bergen's dad is in one of them.
Edgar Bergen,
Yeah.
And Charlie.
And this all really starts with Fantasia, and it's a sign of how popular radio is at the time for big band jazz and for classical music. And it used to be really hard to go see classical because it would cost something, and it's an upper crust thing, and it was a way that middle class people could enjoy high culture. And so you get that accompanied by animation in movies like Fantasia, Melody Time, Fun and Fancy Free, this one, Saludos Amigos.
Don't forget that in the 40s, 50s, even in the 60s, classical music sold sometimes as popularly as popular music did. People bought certain popular concertos and instrumental pieces on a single the way they would buy a hit parade song.
Well, we've got later on in this pod we're talking about a Gershwin biopic.
That's right. And I think I've seen all of the Disney anthology movies. I don't think I've seen the Three Caballeros, but I've seen most of them, and I find them all really a struggle to get through.
With exception to Fantasia, which is my favorite Disney animated movie.
I never think of that as an anthology, though, even though I guess you're right, it is. I mean, that's an incredible film. But yeah, Make Mine Music was a slog to get through a second time. And we're talking about 70 minutes because they've dropped one of the episodes from it. It's been removed.
It's more interesting as a document than as a whole movie or even as a series of movies. Like, it's not enjoyable as the sum of its parts either.
Yeah.
But you do get cool music from Dinah Shore and the Andrews Sisters.
Yep.
And you get a version of Peter and the Wolf.
Yes. So, and that's the other thing about these films is that a lot of them had sections that were picked apart and marketed separately in future years. Peter and the Wolf often played as a short before features. It's one that my sister particularly remembers loving as a little kid. I remember having the book.
Mike's dad used to play that Russian version to Mike and his brother when they were growing up. And then we've got a little movie, you may have heard of it, called Notorious by Alfred Hitchcock.
Notorious.
No, Notorious. Hitchcock would be back not many times. He's a director who's not loved in his time critically like he is now. But he'd be back.
Well, he's also so popular. I think that Cannes felt that it was kind of a waste of their time to even, feature him.
Yeah. So he'd be back with I Confess in 1953. That's the one that there's a really good Québécois film about called Le Confessionnel.
And I visited all the filming locations a couple years ago when I was in Quebec City. It also features Montgomery Clift as a priest.
Oh, yeah.
Would there be an altar boy in the world who had any complaints about life if Montgomery Clift was your priest?
And then he'd be back again with The Man Who Knew Too Much in 1956.
Yeah, so we don't have essential Hitchcock when it comes to the features at Cannes.
No.
The closest would be Notorious. I like this movie a lot more than you do. This and Rebecca are my favorites of his.
I mean, that makes it
40s.
sound like I don't like it that much.
No, but I think I like it more than you do from the way you've talked about it.
This is my first time watching it. I think it's solid. I think it's going to be the movie that grows on me with multiple watches.
I think it's so good. I think it's Claude Rains' finest performance. Of all his 4 Oscar nominations, I think this is the one he should have won.
He's so chilly, but also pathetic.
Yes. Yeah. And it's a great role as well. And, I love Cary Grant as much as everybody, but he was never sexier than he is in this film. The chemistry he has with her is particularly hot. And there's just something, Hitchcock was really great at taking squeaky clean actors and finding their dark side. And he is just so much hotter in this film because he's got like a real dirty vibe to him underneath that pristine suit.
Yeah, Cary Grant gains sex appeal the more he seems like he'd treat you mean.
Yeah, dirty daddy.
Hitchcock has a knack for surrounding big name stars with these uncanny casting choices. Get a load of this mom who looks like Derek Jacobi.
Yes, she's so great and she's so scary.
Horrifying.
Yeah.
And when she descends the stairs and walks towards the camera, that stylistic choice to not cut at all, but let us just sit there waiting for her to get closer to the screen, frightening.
Hitchcock's films have a lot of imposing crone characters who don't give me the impression that he hates women for not being beautiful. Do you know what I mean? Like they have a nuance to them and an authority to them, even in their evil. You get the impression that the actress gets to be in on the joke as well. And I love those figures in his films. I find them fascinating.
Like Judith Anderson and Rebecca. Yeah, but I would say it's not my favorite of his, but it's definitely like my favorite of his black and white movies.
It's a really tight movie as well. Like there's really not much to it. It kind of takes place over very few locations and situations, but it covers a lot. And also her gowns are stunning.
And it's so intelligent. The choice to not kill anybody off at the end, either victoriously or tragically.
Yeah.
But to just imply what's going to happen when she's rescued and Claude Rains has to go back inside that mansion. Very smart movie. I do like this one a lot. And I do think it deserved a place in the awards circle of this year.
For sure.
Then we've got a little jukebox musical about George Gershwin called Rhapsody in Blue.
Yeah, little. It's 2.5 hours and it took me all day to get through it.
By Irving Rapper, who has made a really great melodrama called Now Voyager with Betty Davis.
Let's not worry about having the moon when we have the stars.
Yes, I love that line. This movie got Oscar noms for sound and score. I think it's fairly well crafted, and it's only boring because it goes on too long.
And it's another movie where it's like these musical biopics, they really all have the same story, the same progression of like obscurity to success. In this case, you also have a very Jewish composer whose Jewishness is implied through the way that the parents behave, but is never outright stated, from what I recall. And also goes through like his most popular music, particularly Rhapsody in Blue, and stars his real life best friend playing himself, which was Oscar Levant. who, in case you don't know, Sean Hayes won a Tony Award last year for playing Oscar Levant on Broadway in a show in which Sean Hayes played the full Rhapsody in Blue in every performance, like 8 times a week. Because he's a trained concert pianist, which a lot of people don't necessarily know.
I did not know that.
And basically had his wrists in ice like all day, every day for months because he was playing. That's a really, really hard piece.
What cannot Sean Hayes do? Like I know
because he's like this powerful producer as well, and yeah.
Like I know the many things that he will not be cast to do because homos don't get to play anything other than.
Well, and his kind of homo especially, yeah.
Totally. Like he'll always get cast as the maestro.
Yeah.
But what like the talent is bottomless with that guy.
I know. Yeah. Bottomless. So I appreciate Oscar Levant is so great. He's really funny in this movie. He was really funny in real life. He checked himself into psychiatric care at some point in his life because he suffered with depression. One of my favorite quotes of his, George Gershwin never married, and there's been a lot of speculation about that. He died when he was like 39, so it's possible that he just never got married because he didn't have time to get around to it. But someone said to Oscar Levant once, George keeps fucking all these women to prove that he's a real man. And Oscar Levant said, what a wonderful way to prove it. Which is a quote that I love. Anyway, this film is fine. It's handsomely mounted. It's very, very well produced. You can tell that that it's just all about him because they have two of the most boring women in Hollywood history playing the female leads, Joan Leslie, who was always just the girlfriend and everything, and Alexis Smith, who was also Canadian. She was from BC. Also an actress I never found particularly interesting. We recently watched her in The Age of Innocence, which was her last film, which was released after she died. She played Mrs. van der Leyden. Yeah, and then you have Alan Alda's dad playing George Gershwin, who's even less sexy than his son.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't recommend this movie, even though I don't think it's bad. I just instead encourage listeners to go watch Bradley Cooper's Maestro because it achieves what this movie cannot, which is explain how these kinds of brilliant people suck people into their orbit.
That's right.
Then we've got a silly goose of a movie by Compton Bennett, The Seventh Veil. I have difficulty taking psychoanalysis seriously in this like Life magazine era of Hollywood. And I understand why people try to make fun and camp of these things. But you can't not get caught up in this movie in all of its ridiculousness because of how like straight-faced and well acted it is.
Yeah, and it also plays, even though it is, you're totally right about the way psychology is performed in these films, but because this movie kind of plays like Rebecca, I'm fine with it. I love this movie. I hang on its every word. I've told you, I love Ann Todd so much. I think she is incredible, and I love her in this film. I could watch her not talk for hours and not get bored. She's incredible. Incredible. I love this film. It's written by, one of the writers is Muriel Box, who went on to become a filmmaker in her own right. She won an Oscar for this. And a few years ago, the film program on the BBC did a whole episode on her career and interviewed her daughter about this lovely woman who enjoyed her film career and was really quite touched that anyone even remembered her by the time she died. She's super not pretentious and always appreciated the Oscar as, Oscars going to British films in the 40s was seen as a great compliment to an industry that was struggling to put itself back together after the war, and hers was among them. She won the original story Oscar for this film.
And there's something so steely and mesmerizing about James Mason's voice.
And the two of them together, I particularly love. It's a really cruel story. It's fascinating. It's like a precursor to Phantom Thread, I feel like, where these two complicated, awful people are giving as good as they get.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what's that insult he says to her about her pedestrian taste?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love this film. I love British movies from this period, and I particularly love this film.
And to our listeners, if you didn't get around to it yet, do go back and watch The Passionate Friends by David Lean. We talked about it in our 49 episode.
And Breaking the Sound Barrier. She's brilliant in that, too.
Ann Todd. Thumbs up. Thumbs up for Ann Todd. Today.
Thumbs up, Ann Todd.
We've got, from Alexander Petushko, we've got The Stone Flower from 1946.
Yeah, there's a whole slew of Russian movies in the competition, and we couldn't watch any of them because none of them had subtitles, except for this one, in which everyone looks like a drag queen.
I wish the rip we got of this was better quality because it did look grand. I like it won Best Color, an award for Best Color this festival.
Yeah, it's a beautiful film, and
yeah. I should mention, by the way, Make Mine Music won a special award for its music.
Right.
But I like that it looks like Fairy Tale Theater by Shelley Duvall crossed with the Stay With Me video by Shakespeare's sister.
Totally. It totally does. This is another case of a country promoting its film industry through fables and fairy tales as a way to get people to put down Hollywood product for a second and appreciate their own. Although I don't know that was a problem in Soviet Russia, but this is, it's a very beautiful film. Soviet films based on fairy tales are interesting. They often incorporate elements of other arts like ballet. Everyone in this movie feels like a dancer in some kind of way. And it's a really interesting look. I don't think it's a great movie, but it's a movie with elements to it that I find fascinating.
I would appreciate if it gets the Arrow video or Kino Lorber treatment, because
sure.
I want to watch a better fidelity version of it.
Yeah.
Then from H. Bruce Humberstone, we've got Wonder Man, starring Danny Kaye. The original Robin Williams, Jim Carrey.
Combined with musical talent as well. Danny Kaye. Daniel Kaminsky from Brooklyn, New York, I think is where he was from. He was an incredible talent. He could sing, he could dance, he could do comedy, he could do everything. He was probably very intense to be around.
He could suck the chrome off a bumper.
He probably could. He had a great body when you see him stripped down. Yeah, he was in really, really fine shape. I know that there is a famous rumor about him having had a long time affair with Laurence Olivier. That's never been proven.
Okay.
There's not even like, I don't know. It seems to be an apocryphal rumor. There's nothing to base it on other than Kenneth Anger, who, as we learned from Karina Longworth, made a lot of shit up.
I think people entertain it because we want him to be queer.
Sure.
We want him in our club, basically.
He very well could have been, but there's nothing to indicate. In terms of when they find letters between people, that's usually one of the things that gives these things away. Mm-hmm. There's nothing like that. Anyway, Wonder Man is one of many films that he made. Danny Kaye's kind of a forgotten star. He was really, really popular in his heyday. All of his films were basically gimmicky in ways to show off his talents, much like a Jim Carrey movie like Liar Liar. So he is a precursor in that way, which is he often played multiple roles in his films, complicated plots, and he really lived up to it. In this case, you have a movie that I believe won the Oscar for Best Special Effects.
And was nominated for 3 others.
Yeah, and he plays twins in it, and various characters and whatever. This is not one of my favorites of his. I find it really clever and fun, but it's not the best one. I love Knock on Wood the most. Which is him as a ventriloquist who goes to a sanatorium in Switzerland to deal with his nervous breakdown, but doesn't realize someone has hidden microfilms in his wooden dummy, and hilarity ensues. It's so good. And then, of course, everyone loves The Court Jester. That's the most popular and enduring film of his, but he was wonderful.
Yeah, this movie is never boring, always entertaining, probably forgettable.
Yeah.
But I do recommend it to people if they haven't seen anything of Danny Kaye's.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up with White Christmas. I love that movie for reasons that are not rational. This is better than that. So you wouldn't do wrong starting with this. And it is the film debut of Vera Ellen.
Right. Who also had something of a sad end, from what I recall.
She did. I can't recall what it is, but she's somebody where you really can see the wear and tear of the studio system over a decade.
Yeah, because she had an eating disorder, I believe.
Well, and that's why she's wearing turtlenecks all through White Christmas.
Yeah.
And then by that point, her voice has dropped like 7 octaves.
And then she had a daughter who died, something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, tragic life.
On that note,
this is the part of the episode where we name our worst in show.
Yeah.
Mine was not a winner of any prizes, but it was probably the most costly of all of the movies in the list. I'm picking Caesar and Cleopatra by Irving Pascal. Is that the name?
Gabriel Pascal, who was obsessed with Shaw and wanted to basically bring every Shaw play to the big screen. And he had a huge success the first time he did it with Pygmalion in 1938, and that sort of gave him the impetus to go further. He spent more money on this film than any film had ever cost in England up to this point.
Or in Hollywood. Until
Yeah, there's
Duel
like
of the Sun.
a giant sphinx in the background and whatever. And the result, I'm actually surprised you picked this because I don't think this movie's that bad, but it's not great either. Like they're both brilliant in it, but the chemistry doesn't really take off. And Shaw was a genius. I mean, he was someone that you went to really hear fascinating examinations of society, economy, morality. He had a lot to say about the role that capitalism played and how people viewed particularly Christian religion and morality.
Mrs.
I don't
Warren's
know that
profession.
that's...
Yeah.
What, sorry?
Mrs. Warren's profession.
Yeah, and Major Barbara and Pygmalion as well. And I don't know that makes for exciting cinema, and it's proven by this film, because I actually really love this play as well. I saw it at Stratford with Christopher Plummer a few years ago, more than a few years ago, and I love Vivian Leigh in the role.
You do?
I do, yeah. But yeah, the movie does not really come off. I find it okay, but it's not like a classic. And audiences felt the same way. It did not do well at all, and it ruined him. He was able to make Shaw's Androcles and the Lion after this, but that's a very, very low budget movie that looks like a glorified TV movie by comparison.
He had another high budget movie in the works that got scrapped because of what a colossal failure this movie was.
That's right.
My problem with this movie is my understanding about the play is it's supposed to be about how these two people are attracted to each other for political reasons as well as romantic. And I just don't believe Vivian Leigh is that smart. She's actually very often she's like a petulant child in the movie. And then Claude Rains bothers me. He should never be a lead. He's a fantastic supporting actor. He's amazing this year in Notorious. He's amazing in The Passionate Friends. We just mentioned that. The list is endless of amazing Claude Rains performances, but him as Caesar...
Yeah, because he's supposed to be... it is supposed to be a problematic dirty daddy situation. You know, he's an old man. She's a teenage girl. They fascinate each other. They challenge each other. And they do attract each other. I mean, she did have a relationship with him. And there is supposed to be a forbidden sexuality between them, even though they are talking about more important things. And then, of course, again, it's Shaw ruminating on morality and power, and also on the divide between the personal and the political that these two people represent. But Claude Rains is, he's a bit too patrician, and he's sexless. He's
utterly.
So that's also not great for the role. If she was working against her usual co-star, her beloved husband, it would have worked a lot better.
Yeah, I agree with that. He can do sex.
Yeah, he probably was offered it and couldn't do it or didn't want to do it, but yeah.
The movie was delayed by a number of things. There was a German bomb raid.
The war, basically. Yeah.
They had to... the director was fixated on moving sand from Egypt to England. And also, tragically, Vivian Leigh had a miscarriage on set.
Yeah, and... Pascal loved Shaw to the point that even Shaw was baffled by it, and they kind of broke. They probably went separate ways because Shaw was like, just stop doing this.
Why are you obsessed with me?
Yeah, basically.
Bill, what is your dand? And then we can talk about it.
Well, my dand is one of the Palme d'Or winners, actually. So even though that term does not exist yet, and it is The Turning Point by Friedrich Ermler. So we can talk about it now, or we can save it for that section. I
mean, we're basically now in the Grand Prix section.
We are.
So we can start with Turning Point and then work backwards.
Great. The Turning Point is Russian men talking for 2 hours. I have watched it twice, and I don't know what it's about.
I reread the plot today and just couldn't remember it.
Yeah.
It's military
I'm going to know what it's about, but yeah, it is. It's probably very intelligent. And, I'm sure that, again, it's the end of the war. I'm sure people appreciate this grown-up, unfettered, like there's no fat on it kind of, like it's a very straightforward telling of this military victory. But I remember understanding it the first time I watched it, but I couldn't remember what it was about. I could barely pay attention the second time.
You know what else is intelligent, Bill? A game of Risk. Just go do that.
And sorry, I should point out, I did not outright hate any of the films in this competition. I actually had a hard time picking my best and worst because there were a lot that I really liked and a lot that I found really hard to sit through. I understand that there are qualities to this movie that make it good, but that's why I picked it, because it was the hardest to sit through.
I'm with you. Nothing was vile, but I will say a remarkable number of the boring ones are in the winners list.
Yes.
This is the third time that we've seen a Soviet film that portrays World War II like an encyclopedia page.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, like, when you watch American war movies, or you watch Canadian war movies, or you watch Western European war movies, there's a lot of like master narrative going on. Like the Brits always want to talk about Dunkirk. Canada always wants to talk about Vimy Ridge. Russians, we don't want to say this, they essentially won World War II. And so all they do is they just say what happened, and it's very boring. And there's no heroes. There's no there's no mythology to it. It's very dry. So if you're a war historian, maybe you will love this.
I mean, and it's before the Cold War really gets underway. So there's also no bullshitting. Like there's no manipulation propaganda, which from a historical point of view, I always find interesting to watch.
Totally. But that movie that we watched from 1975, that was like 3 hours long and gorgeous to look at, but boring as hell. There was the one Glory Road was the same, or is that?
Greek. But yeah.
No. Greek was there was.
Oh, that's the Glory Sky. Glory Road. What was that?
It's from the same year. They're all awash now.
Yeah.
We can find them and clarify. Shall we move on, or is there anything else you want to say about this movie?
No, let's move on, please.
All right.
Yeah.
And that was The Turning Point.
Oh, hi, Frage.
Here are two movies that we could not source. Men Without Wings, Muži bez křídel by František Kapp. And this is the shortest film ever to win a Palme d'Or. At
79 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then a movie that was never even released in its home country. We have an Indian film called Niche Nagar by Chetan Anand.
Which is very easy to find, but you have to speak the language. I assume it's in Hindi, but yeah.
Yeah, probably in Hindi.
Yeah.
Based on The Lower Depths.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And now we have the pleasure of talking about 8 winners. Starting with a very famous movie, a very beloved movie, a very good movie, Brief Encounter by David Lean. Lean would be back in 1949 with a movie I don't talk about enough, apparently, The Passionate Friends, and then again in 1966 with Dr. Zhivago.
I love David Lean so much. He was really incapable of making a bad movie, although he did make one. But his movies are magnificent. Brief Encounter is the movie that puts him on the map. He had made In This Our Life in 1942, which he co-directed with Noel Coward because Noel Coward had written it and didn't trust himself to be able to direct a film, and also played the lead role in it. So he asked David Lean to help him. David Lean at that point was well known as a film editor. And then Noel Coward pretty much ended up leaving a lot to him because it was obvious that he knew what he was doing. And that film was nominated for Best Picture. And then Brief Encounter came out. It actually came to the States in 46, I believe. And it's at this festival in 46. I believe it's a film from 45. But it was seen as a revolution for its putting quote unquote normal people into this grand melodrama. There's a lot of unfortunate writing at the time about, isn't it amazing that Celia Johnson isn't pretty and yet you feel so much for her? There's a lot of shock to that. But when you think about what people were watching in movies,
yeah,
it's not that, I mean, I understand what they're talking about. Movies are, particularly in that era, women were hyper glamorized in film. Rita Hayworth was passed off as just another woman looking for a guy. So of course Celia Johnson's going to come across as a shocking revolution because she's not pretty. She actually has a very unsightly mole on her nose that they do a good job of hiding as often as they can. But she's beautiful and she's fascinating and she's so sympathetic and she's got those crazy big eyes and she's got like the Claire Foy thing where you look at her and you know exactly what she's thinking all the time. There's so much feeling and expression to her.
Well, and who else besides maybe like Falconetti can hold a close-up for that long?
And it's amazing how beloved this film is, given that it is something of it's like an examination of a very frosty middle-class world. They are both so English. And yet it's a movie beloved by people of so many different walks of life and backgrounds and cultures and whatever, because it does have such a tender feeling for their small little suburban lives and the little bit of passion that they get from having this torrid affair that never really goes anywhere. They never even fuck.
No, they don't. And yet they're more palpable than the leads in Baby Girl.
Yeah. Celia Johnson getting finger banged on the hotel carpet. Can you imagine?
Celia Johnson lapping up milk.
Yeah, this is not my favorite David Lean movie, but it's such a lovely movie. And it's like 80 minutes long, you know, just like what's the matter? Just watch it.
Oh, yeah. It's like a little confection. But also, it doesn't have to be as gorgeously made as it is.
Yes.
This is a small movie based on a Noel Coward play, Still Life. And it would be fine enough if it was just cleverly written and brilliantly acted by these two leads. But we have gorgeous photography of the train station. We have these feelings of rooms that we can sit inside. I'm thinking of the cafe that's now become famous since this movie.
Yes.
Her living room where she sits with her husband who's not noticing her. His movies have texture and dimension, whether they're small or big.
Noel Coward had he was a queenie gay man with a mean sense of humor and a very wonderful sense of humor. He was the one who told Peter O'Toole, if you were any prettier, they would have had to call it Florence of Arabia. And yet he reveals in his writing an incredible love for humanity and a tenderness for humanity. The gossipy friend that interrupts them on their last time together, it's so annoying because she won't stop talking and she doesn't get it. But at the same time, the movie does not make us hate her for it. She's not a shrew. She's not like the gossip in All That Heaven Allows. She's just a person who is chatty with her friend. And like, nobody's like overly suspicious of them. Nobody's cruel, basically. And even like the husband doesn't notice her, but that's because that's what happens when you've been married for 20 years. Yeah. He's not presented as an unfeeling monster. And her having an affair is not because she needs to get away from him. It's just because it's one of those things that happens. And her guilt for it isn't like terrible, I'm going to hell guilt. It's just, and then at the end, you know, she just chooses the life she has. And again, this is the end of a war. People are living very compromised lives. A lot of people, their family is no longer complete. Their house was probably bombed. And it's just a way of saying, like, just get through it, you know, just like appreciate what you've got, do your best, get through it. We're all people. We all have feelings. It's so lovely and humane.
There's no morbid resignation to her choosing the life she has at the end.
Yeah.
She's like, okay, well, that was a spell, and I still got a good thing here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think that her husband has implied to her that he knows that she's been up to something when he says you've been gone a while?
I don't think so. I think he knows that she hasn't been happy. I think he can tell that she's not, on planet Earth for a little while. But yeah. The
last thing I'll say on this is it's our fourth outing with Trevor Howard. It's our earliest outing with Trevor Howard. Mm-hmm. And he's got skin like Nicole Kidman in Destroyer. And he can still pull off sexy.
I know. You can tell he's a good kisser. That's what I like about him. That's what I find sexy about him.
Yeah. From Alf Joberg, we have Hetz or Torment. Joberg would be back in 1951 with Miss Julie. He'd win the Palm.
That's right.
And then he would be back again in 53 with Barabbas, with Domarin in 1961, and with On in 1966. Warning, hot people in this movie.
Oh yeah, this guy looks like what we think Swedish men are always going to look like, and then you get there and they all look like Bjork. But he's like actually really handsome.
He's like Claes Bang handsome.
Yes, yeah. Very, very handsome. The only issue with him in this movie is that he's playing a high school student and he's clearly like 27.
Yes.
And it kind of gets in the way of his the sort of youthful naivete he's supposed to have.
Yes.
This is Ingmar Bergman's first produced screenplay. Before he would go on to direct his own. Ingmar Bergman's earliest films are interesting because a lot of them are like this. They're like soap opera melodramas. He doesn't really get into, thinking endlessly about death and God until a few years after this. The thing I find interesting about this film is that I find the female subplot to be completely unnecessary and there to just add sexy tawdriness. It could just be about him dealing with his cruel headmaster with whom he has this very fascinating Whiplash-esque relationship because the teacher is like, he's really cruel, but then other times he's really pathetic and what?
His nickname is Caligula.
Yeah. Other times, though, he's like needy, right? Like he wants to be one of the cool kids, and back and forth. And then, but he's also sexually abusing our hero's girlfriend, who is portrayed as kind of a loose woman, a woman of low character, who ends up dying in the most ridiculous way, played by Mai Zetterling, who would become a director in her own right. And we all in North America know her as the grandmother in Nicholas Roeg's The Witches.
Luke.
Yeah. You may remove your shoes.
Grandma, I saw a witch. A real one?
She's so great. Yeah, so I do like this movie, but and I don't really mind that I feel that way about her plot, but it is something that I noticed particularly this time watching it. But he's really great. I can't remember his name, but he's really great.
He is really great. Yeah, it's stark and menacing, and it's sometimes noirish, like early Lang.
Yes.
Which makes for an interesting way to portray the tortures of adolescence.
Yeah.
I just thought, like, if you're gonna go with that tone, like, stay sleepers. Don't then do this cop-out ending where, like, this other paternal teacher figure is just like, it's okay, I know you failed school, but I'll make sure you end up okay.
Yeah, there's elements of, you can tell that, Bergman, of course, got his start in the theater, and there's elements of that in terms of the complications between the two antagonizing characters. The female subplot to me suggests that he also was a movie lover and was like, when he gets his opportunity to work in films, is sort of like wanting to make the movies that he loves as opposed to the ones that are actually on his mind.
The ending of this movie reminded me a lot of being pissed off at two outings at the movies where it was both really good movies and then they just ended, like, the directors didn't know what to do with them, and that was An Education and Precious. Because Precious ends on this note where it's like, it's okay, I have AIDS and my kid has Down syndrome and I don't have healthcare. I'm gonna pull together.
Yeah,
and then by
believing in myself. I never thought that movie was great up until that point anyway, but yeah.
And then An Education literally ends with her saying, and that's how I got an education.
I love that movie though.
From Leopold Lindbergh, we've got Die letzte Chance, or The Last Chance, from 1945. Lindbergh would be back with Four in a Jeep in 1951 and The Village in 1953. This movie is about an American and a Brit who help a bunch of refugees get across the Alps to escape the Nazis.
Yeah.
The version on Tubi that we watched was evidently ripped from an old VHS.
Yes.
There were scratchy parts that looked like the vagina shot in your home video of Basic Instinct.
It's been paused too many times.
Yeah. It's not interesting. It certainly doesn't need to be in this group.
No, and it's another case of, like, it's cool that you're working with non-professionals, but there's a reason why they're non-professionals. They're not exactly movie stars. It reminded me of that Clint Eastwood movie from a few years ago where he recreated those American guys who stopped a hijacking on a train and got the real guys to play them. And then it's just like, yeah, there's a reason why we hire actors for these things. These guys were real POWs who, in one case, was wearing his actual uniform from his POW, from his camp experience. Yeah. But yeah, I don't remember this movie at all, and I watched it like 10 days ago.
It really goes to show in a year where 30 of the 44 movies that are in the running for the top prize are war movies.
Yeah.
A number of the winners are winning for their noble intentions.
Absolutely.
You can almost certifiably tell you're not going to like a movie if it gets a congratulatory review from Bosley Crowther. A tense, exciting drama based substantially on documented facts.
Yeah, he didn't pay attention to it either.
No. Next up, we've got the previous year's Best Picture winner, The Lost Weekend by Billy Wilder. This movie won 4 Oscars out of its 7 nominations, including the big ones: Best Picture, Screenplay, Director, Actor. We mentioned that Ray Milland had won Best Actor already just months before. But something else that stood out to me is that Wilder becomes the first director ever to win both for directing and writing.
Oh, okay.
You know, this is before auteur theory is really taking off, but he's already establishing himself as one.
This is before his auteur theory is taking off as well. This movie's an outlier in his filmography. I find that there's a touch to Billy Wilder's movies that you can detect in all of his films, no matter what they're about, including as disparate subject matter as Stalag 17 to Sabrina. But Lost Weekend is not like any other film of his to me. Other than the fact that, again, he was another one who had a great deal of sympathy for humanity. And there is a lot to this movie that is incredibly dated, as we mentioned earlier, particularly in its view of addiction. But at the same time, it suggests that alcoholism is a disease, which is not how people were thinking about it back then. People were thinking about it as a choice and a moral failing. And I saw this movie 1,000 years ago, and I barely remembered it, so I rented it a couple years ago to sort of refresh myself, and then watched it again for this show. And this last time I watched it, I was really struck. It affected me more than I ever had before. I still don't really love it, but I found it touching. I cared a great deal for this man's struggle, and was reminded that this movie has a lot of elements to it that are actually quite shocking for 1945. They don't soft shoe the fact that other girl is a hooker, basically. I mean, she's a call girl.
Yeah.
They spell that out in more frank ways than I've ever seen in any other movie from this period. Usually, if a girl is a working girl, they make her like a dancer in a cafe or something to represent her as a hooker.
14 years later, she'll be way more garish in the apartment.
Some sex pot you are.
Yeah. There's also a very queenie gay nurse, male nurse.
Yep.
Who, again, I feel like he's just screaming, I'm a big faggot, basically, which surprises me because he's also good at his job, kind if jaded, like he's there's a texture to New York types in this movie who are all like real people that you see in the big city.
He's Belize in Angels in America.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate those aspects of it. There's that very upsetting image of the bat on the wall eating the mouse, which is a horrific element that I also would have been shocking at the time. They talk about how in the studio, in the Hays Code years, every once in a while, the censors would allow a movie to slip through with things that went against the code if they felt that it had a moral message to it. Johnny Belinda is another case of this because it's a movie about a girl who is raped and has a baby. And this is probably the case with this film as well, which is that they felt that because it was telling people about real life, that it could be as frank as it is, and probably was screened with a lot of warnings outside of theaters for parents about bringing their children to see it. But again, I don't think it's a great movie, but I think it is. I think it is important to remember it in the context of its time.
Agreed.
And interesting to remember it in the context of his career, given that he never made a movie like this ever again.
No, I would think of it as a transitional movie between Wilder, the German emigre, and Wilder, the individual genius.
Yeah, sure.
Because the scene of I'm guessing it's extrapolating on parasitosis, which is alcoholics can get it, people on meth get it. It's you can hallucinate bugs or things under your skin.
Right.
And so this is an exaggerated version of that, him seeing a bat eating a mouse from inside the hole in the wall. But that scene is like something out of German Expressionism.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And in fact, a lot of the more sordid aspects of his alcoholism are played up for German Expressionist effect.
Yeah. It's also a strong piece from somebody who has only started directing very recently. I mean, he made one film in France before he fled the Nazis in the mid-30s. And then he doesn't debut in Hollywood as a filmmaker until 1943, which is 2 years before this. So. And
then the last fact I wanted to share about this movie.
42, excuse me.
Two cool facts about this movie. It's the first Hollywood movie to feature a theremen, which will be prevalent in
sci-fi in the years to come,
and Portishead albums. And
nobody loves me, it's true.
Wow.
Not like you do. Goldfrapp too.
Goldfrapp as well. Oh yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Your lovely head. And the movie, and I'm assuming this is why the nurse is still in it. The movie substitutes writer's block for homosexuality.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. In the source text, he's having a homosexual affair that leads him to alcoholism.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Not the first, not the last.
Not the first, not the last.
Yeah.
Moving on, we've got from Mexico, we've got Maria Candelaria by Emilio Fernandez.
Candelaria.
You say it again?
Candelaria.
Fernandez would be back again with Pueblerina and La Red in 49 and 53. This movie is It's about a Lattuada of a whore. It's a familiar kind of folk tale.
Yeah, it's a folktale, and again, another case of a culture drawing people away from Hollywood product to celebrate their own culture by falling back on traditional stories. I would enjoy this movie a lot more if it was 70 minutes long, because I feel like it stretches things out a bit, and also has a sense of tragedy that is not really justified. It is narrated in the present day by a painter who then tells the story of this woman in this indigenous village who is rejected by her fellow villagers because her mother had been a prostitute and they had killed her. And she basically can't work. Like, they won't allow her to sell her wares. And then he ends up painting her. And then it's like, well, you could have just not painted her naked. For some reason, he paints her head on another model's naked body. And then that makes them kill her too. It's like, well, then if you know that these people are ignorant, why did you do that?
And on that note, this movie has a illustrious Wikipedia page about how it's been perceived and received over.
And I think the story's been remade a number of times as well because it's a popular tale. And also, it features the very popular Dolores Del Rio. This is at the point at which her Hollywood career has really wound down. She's in her 40s and she goes back to Mexico. So it's a huge deal it's like Penelope Cruz going back to Spain in Volver, her starring in this movie. And then Pedro Armendáriz is her love interest. I know him best for his final film in From Russia with Love, the James Bond film where he plays Ali Karim Bey, which he made while dying of cancer, and I think died before they even finished shooting that movie. So it's a big production. It's a big deal, this film.
Yeah, but it was not. I don't know if it was felt the same way at the time, but today it's considered a example of a negative, stereotypical portrayal of indigenous people as idyllic and childlike.
But yeah, absolutely. Noble savages. Yeah.
Yeah. Then we've got The Red Meadows, De Rude Enge, from 1945 by Bodil Ibsen and Lau Lauritzen Jr. You like how I pronounce junior like a Danish person? This movie is it's the memories of a saboteur for the Danish resistance.
Yes.
As he waits for his execution by the Nazis.
Yeah. Also a bit of a cutie.
Oh, totally. And the movie is kind of it kind of views a second or third build Hollywood movie. It's got that aesthetic.
Yeah.
It's very blunt. And then it's moments
of violence. And we managed to find a good copy of it as well, which made me happy. I thought this movie was solid. I actually really enjoyed it. It's a strong war movie. As you said, he's a saboteur who is arrested and
and then he's waiting.
That's right. It's narrated in flashbacks because he's awaiting his execution. I thought this movie was great.
Totally. I'm not cool with an 11 winner circle, but this is not one of the bad ones. And I think it's great, but I distinctly think it's great. Like a movie like Detour is great. This is not it's not a prestige movie. Then we've got a movie no one's heard of called Rome Open City by Roberto Rossellini. This movie is so huge, probably has a reputation that's bigger than the movie is known.
Well, again, Michael Gebert, who wrote Rossellini's influence is far greater than his films. And I know exactly what he means. I've liked other Rossellini movies much more than this one.
Journey to Italy.
Yeah, I have to watch that again. I don't barely remember that. Isn't he also Umberto D? Or that's De Sica?
And I hate Umberto D.
Oh, I love Umberto D. But again, context. When this movie came out, no one had made this movie before. And the power of the neorealist elements of it, filming in real locations in this bombed out city, using scraps of film left over from the German occupation. That's what they filmed it on.
That's why it has all that texture.
That's right. And having professional actors blend in seamlessly with everybody else, like Anna Magnani in one of her most iconic roles. There's a lot that's accomplished with this film that is amazing. To watch it in retrospect, of course, there are elements of it that don't work. There's a lot of there's melodramatic moments. the priest is like pulling comedic faces before he gets shot at the end. Like he's a real ham.
He looks like Ernest Borgnine.
Yeah, and then all the scenes involving the Nazi officer and that woman who, because she's a lesbian, is like made up to look like a she-wolf. And then he's gay, so he's got like eyeliner on. That's an aspect of the story that hasn't aged well, because it's more in line with the thinking of storytelling of the time, which is that they're corrupt and they are abusive of power. So they're also sexually deviant as well.
And let me be clear. Only you and I are allowed to call homosexuals corrupt and abusing power.
Well, yeah, because it's what we do.
I was entertained by the lascivious homosexual fascists.
Which plays out specifically in a actually quite surprisingly frank way of her abusing that cabaret singer's drug addiction by basically making her put out for more heroin. Again, putting the struggles of a people surviving, getting through the final year of the war, which is when they were occupied by Nazi Germany, mainly because they changed sides during the war. Putting that on screen in such unglamorous terms, I have no trouble understanding why this movie had such a powerful impact that it did. But it is worth noting that, like many other movies, including ones by Rossellini, ended up outdoing it, but couldn't exist without this one happening first.
Absolutely. The movie really does set up Paysanne nicely, because Paysanne is a movie that is consciously 6 different vignettes that are not connected to one another. And this movie is unconsciously a bunch of really great set pieces, not very well connected to each other.
Correct, yeah. I like Germany Year Zero a lot, too.
I do, but can I make a complaint? I watched both of those movies for this pod. And Germany Year Zero, that kid is sitting by his ailing father's bedside and then sees on the side table next to all of his medicines a jar that says, "Poison!" like a MacGuffin much?
Yeah. We'll talk more about Rossellini, of course, when we have him as a jury president at some point as well. But yeah, and I really love Stromboli as well, which is, of course, the movie that led to the greatest scandal in Hollywood history.
That's right.
And the existence of one Isabella Rossellini.
That's right. It was quite a scandal when my father left Anna Magnani for my mother, Ingrid Bergman. Anna stayed in the family. I grew up knowing Anna. She was not needy. My mother was very needy, but Anna was a woman who could put my father in his place.
So great. I could listen to Rossellini. I could listen to Isabella talk all fucking day. I could listen to her talking to her goats all day.
I watched all of the extras in this Criterion trilogy, and just for her talking about her dad.
And I love her talking about her parents. It's not twee or precious at all. It's such genuine affection and admiration. She's really proud. We've talked about this before. She's really proud of what they accomplished in the world of cinema, and also just really loved them and misses them so, so much. You know, it's been so long since both of them passed away. She lost them quite young. She was in her 20s, and she misses them both terribly.
And she speaks like a diplomat of the industry. Like she sounds like an Huppert or a Scorsese, like somebody who just loves to talk about movies.
Well, probably also thought it was hilarious that her parents were a scandal, because she grew up in a house with 2 parents who were parents, you know. Like they weren't...
She's the dad of a whore. She's the dad of a whore.
Yeah. So, I mean, her mother was discussed on the Senate floor as a potential threat to American morality. And she's just like, this woman, the woman who keeps forgetting to restock the fridge and leaves us for 4 months at a time. And then when she's home, we have a great time and, you know, fights with my dad and all these other things. Like, this woman is who you guys are also freaked out about.
I know. To her, it's all just so mundane.
Yeah.
From Jean Delannoy. Am I saying that right?
I think so.
Yeah. We've got La Symphonie Pastorale. Pastoral Symphony. I'm so relieved, Bill, because we don't have a feature.
Because we're almost done.
No. We don't have a feature in our series Isabel Watch in this year.
That's right.
But thank God we have French incest.
Well, yes, although to be fair and to be provocative, people did not feel about adoption back then the way they do now. Europeans in particular did not. My mother grew up with No, my mother's father grew up with an adopted sister who they never thought of as their sister, although they loved her as much. But, there was still a line drawn there. No one in her family married her because she was like a first cousin. But yeah, this is a movie about a pastor finds a poor woman dying that he goes to visit and finds her blind. She's not a toddler. She's like a 4-year-old, I guess. Is that a toddler still? I don't know, kids.
Preschooler, whatever.
She's blind. She's living like
Nell.
Helen Keller at the beginning of Miracle Worker. She's just like picking scraps of food up off the floor and somehow not wandering off of cliffs in the Alps.
She eats food without her hands. She's lapping it up with her hair in her face like the girl
that's
from
right.
The Ring.
That's right. Yes, that's right. And he takes her home and he teaches her how to live like a proper blind woman. He teaches her how to everything. And then she's an adult and he falls in love with her, as does his son.
Yes, stepson, I believe.
That's right. Who is really cute.
Yep.
And that's really all it's about. It's a melodrama masquerading as a much tougher, smarter film. It's not a smart film. It's a paperback romance novel.
Totally.
But the actors are good. They take it seriously. I find it kind of boring. I find it gorgeous, though. I find every shot, it's basically Anatomy of a Fall in black and white. Like every shot of the snow and the vistas and the mountaintop village and everything. I couldn't get enough of looking at it.
And the blind child.
And the blind child. Yeah.
Yeah, I like your mention of that. I was also thinking, tonally, the last shot of the movie took me to Leave Her to Heaven, where I was just thinking, I can't believe you can do this in the 40s. There's this shot of him running through the snow, following footsteps because he's worried that she's gone missing, and he finds her. Spoiler alert: he finds our main character dead by a riverside, and then it cuts to her as he's pulling her out of the water, and doesn't she look like Laura Palmer?
Yes.
It is frightening.
Yeah, but that's also the dated element of the film, is the fact that she has to die because she's like, we can't count on her sexually. Yeah. So yeah.
No, it's a deliciously stupid movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't need it to win any awards, but no one would be wasting their time watching it.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's another one of those films where it's like, I've heard about it for decades and I've never seen it. And now I know why. Like, I know why everybody knows it, but no one prioritizes it for a retro screening or a special edition DVD or whatever, because everything important about it has nothing to do with the film itself.
Absolutely. It's about the movie's execution, its style. It's pretty laughable otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Bill, we made it.
We made it. It's only 2.5 hours in. Here we are.
We've actually done pretty well. This is, we had been further along in our Secrets and Lies pod.
Yeah. It's also the most time we've spent together in a long time. So that also made me very happy.
Yes, that's true. And you're bringing out Madonna in her Papa Don't Preach days, which is nice.
Yeah. It's gotten tighter since the last time I watched it. So things are going well.
I want to know, is there any movie in this roster of 11 that you think should have won the Palm or the Grand Prix, as it were? Or do you think it should have gone to something else? From
the competition, my 3 favorites would be Notorious, Gilda, Brief Encounter. I'm going to say Gilda. I think that just should be the Palme d'Or winner of 1946.
Wow.
I think it's ahead of its time. It's like Hollywood working at its finest. It's film art, but it's also mass entertainment. It's exciting and sexy. It's dangerous. It's really dirty, but also really classy. And one of the most wonderful female characters in like the history of cinema. I know she suffers for it in the end, but she's unapologetic and just marvelous.
Wow, I'm kind of jealous that you said Gilda. I wasn't going to. I was just going to be noble. I
couldn't decide. Usually I decide these things in advance. I wrote down a bunch because I said I'm going to see how I feel on the day.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So I know, in a contemporary roster, I know what would win my minor prizes. Like I know I'd give Notorious Best Director. I know I would give the Beauty and the Beast the jury prize because it's a clear jury prize winner.
And would you give my mother, Ingrid Bergman, the Best Actress prize?
No, I give it to Rita Hayworth.
Okay.
I had a thought about who the best actor would be. Oh, I would give it to Danny Kaye.
Hmm.
Although that's not a Cannes prize, let's be real.
Yeah, but still.
For pretentious reasons, I want to give it to Rome Open City because it's big and we think about Palme d'Or as being big, but I just can't because it has so many problems.
Yeah.
So I'm going to give it to Brief Encounter.
That was one of my choices. So yeah, that's a great choice, and it's also one of the most enduring films of this collection. So yeah,
absolutely. Well, I mean, just think about Past Lives, which came out last year. It's basically Brief Encounter, which
our friend Mark called the Brief Encounter for the he they set.
So crass.
Yeah.
A24 crowd.
Yeah.
And is there any movie from 1946 that you would give this to?
I'm torn between two, and I don't want to do another XI quote because we fall back on that far too often.
We do.
So I'm going to say David Lean's Great Expectations, which doesn't come to North America until 47, but it is a 46 release and is still the greatest Charles Dickens movie ever made, particularly for capturing atmosphere and narrative richness and beauty. Yeah, I think that's the one I'd give it to. I'm
going to go a touch sentimental for my choice and go with a children's movie in dazzling color, The Yearling with Gregory Peck and Jane Wyman.
I love that movie so much. I've talked about this before. I'm obsessed with Jane Wyman. I think she's incredible. We should point out her and her leopard print jacket in The Lost Weekend is like the phenomenal performance, the actual phenomenal performance in that film. She's so good.
Yeah.
But I love her in The Yearling so much. She's so the careworn, hard-bitten, but loving. The first time I watched that movie, I was running on the treadmill while watching it, and I still cried over that fucking deer.
It is that movie should be so sappy, but it has rough edges.
Yeah,
there's a feeling of hard living in that movie.
Based on a novel by Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings, I think is her name, Margaret or Marjorie, and Martin Ritt made a wonderful film called Cross Creek, which is about her and her experiences of moving to Florida and writing her two most famous novels, played by Mary Steenburgen.
And the movie stars Spice Girl Alfre Woodard.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, I don't think she... Does she have an honorary Oscar now?
No.
No? Okay, so then she is a Spice Girl.
She's a Spice Girl.
Probably a sporty Spice. Bill, tell our listeners what to look forward to in our next episode.
Well, Greg, we're speaking of Anatomy of a Fall. We are shooting straight up from the first Cannes Film Festival all the way to the almost most recent Cannes Film Festival. We're going to do 2023 and Anatomy of a Fall and everything that came along with that. And hopefully it will be easier to get through.
I honestly can already tell it's going to be easier because, not to say too much, but it's one of the most delicious years.
Yeah, there's a lot of rewatches I'm looking forward to. And also, it's recent enough that if I don't get around to all the rewatches I want to do, I can still talk about the films. So
totally.
Yeah.
As usual, this has been a blast, Bill.
The best that ever was.
The best year of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Take it easy.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to Riviera Rats.
Our podcast is hosted and produced by Bill Antoniou and Gregory Roseborough.
Our music is by Joe Organ.
Our artwork is by Leo Kuvaris.
Follow us on Instagram at Riviera Rats.
Write to us at ratsriviera@gmail.com.
If you want to support our show, tell your friends about us.
Leave us a rating and a review on whatever podcast app you use.